the transfer portal and the Clemson Tigers. Jordan, I don't know if you know this, but if you've watched any Clemson Tiger game so far this season, you have probably seen the graphic that has Dabo Sweeney as the bouncer that says no entry into the Clemson Tiger Club. If you're a transfer, we don't want you. We are going to align ourselves with the service academies and be the only major college football team to not take a transfer portal outside of the service academies. Well, that all ended this past weekend when the Clemson Tigers took their very first, I guess, pivotal transfer portal player that is not a quarterback, that is not a future graduate assistant coach, so on and so forth. Dabo Sweeney breaks the mold, sends shockwaves through college football, if you will, and brings on Tristan Smith, wide receiver out of Southeastern Missouri, 6'5", 205 pounds, got 76 catches, 934 yards, and 6 touchdowns on the season. Big body wide receiver. Your thoughts on Clemson's official first transfer portal piece that is not a quarterback or a former player of Clemson?
I mean, when the news came out, listen, we had talked on this channel that the signs were pointing to Clemson truly not just dipping their toe, but actually taking a dive into the portal. Like with how Clemson was restructuring their NIL and all the things behind the scenes that were going on, the thought was that, okay, they might actually be serious. Right. But the PTSD from the past couple of cycles of going after guys, a guy here or there, but not really truly, closing and not offering, competitive, NIL deals and not landing any of them. You were like, okay, are we going to be serious about the portal, or are we just offering guys to say we did and we tried, and it's going to be the same story that we saw the last few times they've attempted?
Right.
And just when the news dropped, it just out of nowhere. I mean, Tristan Smith was not a guy that people were tracking. Obviously, the big name that right now that people are keeping an eye on is a defensive end, Will Helt from Purdue. So when the news dropped that Clemson just landed their first portal commitment, and it's a wide receiver from Southeast Missouri State, of all places.
What? Where?
It didn't even feel real reading the headline. It was pretty surreal. But I think it's something that they obviously needed to do. I think with the departures of Troy Stellato and Noble Johnson, you have need in terms of numbers, and obviously there's no telling that you don't lose another one.
Right. There may be more to come, especially in that wide receiver position group.
Yeah, exactly. So, it was a need that they needed to fill. And I think they got a really good football player in Tristan Smith. He's, like you mentioned, 6'5", 205. He's a big body, true X receiver. Actually don't have too many of those on the team right now. It's strange. It's how much the wide receiver room has evolved, 2020, 2021, like the room was filled with
big body guys.
Yeah, exactly.
And no quick twitch, separation, route running guys. We had just big body guys, and now we're kind of lacking the big bodies in the room. So good pickup.
Exactly. And so I think you're getting a physical, reliable, extremely reliable hands, receiver. Like I think you can't have too many of those guys. And I think his best football is still ahead of him. I mean, he's a guy that started out as a JUCO player, only had like 400 yards his one season in JUCO, but then he takes the jump to the FCS level and has nearly 1,000 yards and he had 130 receiving yards in a touchdown in Southeast Missouri State's playoff game. Like,
Yeah.
He is a very physical receiver with really, really strong hands. So I think this is a good addition to the room. I'll be interested to see kind of how he factors in to the rotation. But at the very least, it helps your numbers. You need a guy like that, and that's something that we've been banging the drum for Clemson to do. It's like, okay, you don't have to always, not every team is going out here and landing just the high impact guys.
Right. Yeah.
You are able to get guys for depth purposes. Not all of these guys are out here looking for a massive payday.
People should follow the path that Cam Ward took to be ultimately Miami's quarterback and a Heisman finalist. Just go look where he started.
Yeah, man, incarnate word.
Yeah, it's not always the big name guy. It's not always the guy that had 40 plus offers coming out of high school. Sometimes it's the guy that took the road less traveled and took the JUCO route and bet on himself and ultimately proved to be an elite athlete and now he steps into the FCS level and proves himself as almost 1,000-yard receiver and now he steps up and now he's a Clemson wide receiver and he adds a much needed body type in the room, I think, with his 6'5", 205 frame. Just kind of a big body guy, a boundary guy that can go up and get the football and has strong hands and the ability to go high point the ball. I think that's going to be important for a Clemson room as it evolves into next season and as we probably lose, another wide receiver or two as the transfer portal goes and as we move on into spring. And it's not the only guy. This is always what we, me and you, when we talked about the transfer portal and we talked about it when it came to Clemson, this is what we envisioned when it came to Clemson and dabbling in the transfer portal was pulling these type of guys out of the transfer portal. And that's not the only guy. Obviously, edge position is a position of need for the Clemson Tigers. We had Will Helt on post, edge out of Purdue, 6'6", 265, had 26 run stops in 2024. A guy that saw his kind of production diminish at a place in Purdue, so he's looking for a new opportunity. What are your thoughts on Clemson's ability to land him? And then if they don't, do you see them pivoting into looking at other edge position guys that could complement the current room that we have?
Yeah, I think Clemson, first and foremost, I think they did a good job on his visit. He was here for, better part of 2 to 3 days on campus for his visit. He's also visited LSU and A&M. I think it's going to come down to Clemson or A&M. He's gone home and he's mulling his options right now. Mm-hmm. But I do think Clemson is serious about adding somebody to the defensive end group, and I think they definitely need to. And they're not just offering a guy that they is like, okay, we'll just plug him in and he'll be a depth piece. This is a guy they want to factor into the rotation and potentially start for next year. And I think Will Helt showed enough this season as a guy that could be that guy. He showed a lot of twitch and athleticism for a Purdue defense that wasn't particularly good, but he was really disruptive. So I think that, yeah, he's going to be he would be a really massive addition. But if you don't land him, I think Clemson is serious, and they have been casting a wider net as far as their portal options. They're still open to adding potentially another receiver. I believe so.
I could definitely see them doing that. Yeah.
So it's been very pleasing to see the steps that have been taken as far as Clemson's portal efforts and just their strategy. They're having, they're not just finding 3 or 4 guys that they like at one position and then giving up. They've been in contact with a lot of guys reportedly. They've been keeping it under wraps, which I think with Clemson's situation and how they do things is probably the best move. They want to work these things out. kind of in silence and lock him in. The Will Help thing was kind of a leak. Clemson didn't really want that to get out, but his agent reported it, and it just kind of happened that way. So, but I think just with how Clemson goes about doing things, like the portal additions are going to be surprises, kind of like
right, yeah, they're gonna come out of nowhere, like a Tristan Smith. Nobody even knew that he was on Clemson's campus.
Yeah.
Nobody had any idea he was on Clemson's campus. And before they knew, he was basically already committed to the Tigers, already signed to the Tigers, and everything was locked up before the media even knew. You mentioned the leak with Help, but that's kind of how Clemson's going to do it, just like they do it with high school recruiting. It's all behind doors. It's all, kind of tight-lipped and kept under wraps, and they're going to continue to do it that way, but it shows that they've taken a different approach this season when it comes to the transfer portal, as opposed to last season when they went after 3 or 4 offensive linemen and kind of slow played it, similar to how they do high school recruiting, which was never going to work in the transfer portal world. So obviously Clemson's taking a very different approach to that. They've already landed wide receiver Tristan Smith. Maybe they'll end up landing Will Hilt out of Purdue, or maybe some other edge guy, and probably, another 1 or 2 transfer portal guys. I could see Clemson ending up with, 3 to 4 transfer portal guys in this cycle when all is said and done. At some very key positions. You mentioned wide receiver. Obviously, the edge position is a position of need, potentially linebacker as well, and maybe even safety. We'll see how it all shakes out in the end. Who declares to the NFL draft, who doesn't, who decides to transfer out, and who doesn't. That'll obviously determine what kind of positions and potential that's available on this Clemson Tiger roster going forward.
Yep, and the plan, and the great thing is they plan to continue to have feelers out into the spring portal window, so they're going to continue to evaluate the roster and kind of where things sit, and they're going to have guys, they're going to be in contact with guys. Like that's the thing, that it's like, okay, you don't have to just lock everybody in immediately, but they have, and some guys aren't going to wait, but if you cast a wider net, you're gonna you're gonna leave yourself with options. Like that's the thing that they didn't do in previous cycles. They did not, they found a couple of guys and really tried to they really focused their efforts on them. But then when they committed elsewhere, it's like, oh, well, okay, now we invested all these resources into them, but now we don't have anybody else. We don't have anybody else on the back burner. So they've been a lot smarter about their portal strategy this go around, and that's been encouraging.